Tonight, the Atomic Voodoo Lounge podcast and Heavy Sixer Productions are proud to present Backrooms Panic, a story by Zoe Falk. Catalina parked her car at the edge of an interstate bridge. The check engine light rang a fourth time today. With a huff, she lay back against the rough leather seats and closed her eyes. She counted to 10 and opened them again. The blinking signal on her dashboard turned off, enveloping her in the silence of the empty road. Her phone, long overdue for cell service, showed 3:32 a.m. as the time. She sighed and glanced around the dark forest surrounding her vehicle. I wonder if the animals would bother eating me, she thought. I left a restaurant, so I might become dinner for any furry babies. She smiled at the sentiment and gathered she would be useful for once. If not to people, then at least a wild hog or a vulture. The driver's side door popped open. She exited the vehicle and walked along the metal overpass. Crickets chirped in the dark as a cool gust of wind blew into her blouse and hair. The woods usually carried a distinct smell, but at that moment, nothing wafted into her nose. It was the proper atmosphere for a funeral. In 5 quick strides, she hopped over the safety barrier and peered down into the rushing river. The water sloshed about in a sharp rhythm, and with the lack of stars or moon in the sky, it had no reflection. The one time I do this, and nothing is pretty, she huffed, her lips set in a pout. She took a moment, her thoughts a jumble of the events that got her there. A tight-faced doctor told her she had the early stages of brain cancer. A call from her mother's care facility told her the old woman had died from choking on a chess piece. The house she had saved up for was now taken off the market and bought by none other than her ex-boyfriend and his wife. The same wife he told her he'd leave every time she was curled beside him in hotel rooms. Hot tears ran down her face, and without a second thought, she jumped. Catalina groaned, her cheek pressed into a scratchy floor that smelled like wet pennies. She lifted her head, vision in a blurred shade of mustard yellow. She blinked and sat up. Why am I not dead? She wondered if the last couple of hours had been a dream. It certainly felt like one, as she hadn't given her suicide much contemplation. The room she found herself in was the ugliest set of connecting hallways she had ever seen. Yellow, neon walls with brown trim and buzzing overhead lights. The carpet she sat on didn't seem to have been cleaned since it was installed. She lifted her hand and pinched her side. Ow, she grumbled. She was certainly alive, but how? The last thing she could remember was jumping off the bridge. Wind whipped through her hair as she plummeted down 30 feet, then darkness. She rose and took a cautious step. The bottom of her sneakers sank into the wet carpet. The squish made her gag. Hello? She called out, the voice a solitary echo in the bright rooms. She waited for a minute, then called out again. Still nothing. Maybe I fell into one of those underground buildings, she mused and tilted her chin. The ceiling was closed. She hadn't fallen through, Stupid. If I really fell into something like that, the water from the river would have flooded this place before I could open my eyes. With a huff, she stood and trekked along the winding pathways, which felt like hours. Her feet, sore in the old shoes, pinched the sides of the mesh material. After screaming for so long, Catalina's voice was nearly gone. She rubbed her dry throat and rounded the corner. The hallway had opened up into a circular space with 4 directions. In the middle was a comically wide armchair and a round table. She glanced around, finding no sign of life. "At least there's something I can sit in," she mumbled and approached the chair. A heavy sigh left her lips as she sank into the seat. The blue fabric cushions were a relief on her legs. They throbbed as they dangled over the edge. On the table sat a slip of paper wedged under an empty teacup. She arched her brow and plucked it. It was a note. "Dear reader, I write this as a warning. Do not die. No matter what happens or how bad life gets, do not jump from windows or take a toaster bath. I did that, and right now, I wish I had just taken Mary's advice and talked to a therapist." My name is Peter Quinn. I was a high school janitor and a university dropout. My age is 32, I think, and I have an orange cat named Moose. Why am I telling you this? I don't know. I guess I just wanted someone to know who I was in case I didn't make it out. Likely, if you're reading this, you're either thinking of ending things or have already done it and are roaming where I am. If it's the second option, then listen carefully. I got here for many reasons. I was evicted from my apartment, was working a job I hated, and got dumped by my girlfriend, the Mary woman I mentioned. So, like any other normal American, I gave Moose to a friend who I knew could take care of him and jumped off a bridge. I was supposed to hit the ground, but instead of a splat on sharp rocks, because of course the river would be dry in April, I landed on the same carpet you probably did. If you did, then keep reading. If not, then good luck. Okay, if you're still here, then that means you're in a room with yellow walls, dirty gray carpet, and buzzing fluorescent lights. Well, hate to break it to you, but you're in a maze. Yeah, these rooms don't end. At least not at first. If you found this at the table with the weird blue armchair, then take the first path on the left. From there, you'll keep going and find a second item I left behind. A star carved into the wall. There was a rock, believe it or not, on the floor, so I'll use that. I'm also almost out of paper, so you'll find part 2 there. That is, if I find something to write on. So, there was someone here. Catalina folded the note and shoved it in her jeans pocket. The idea that someone was in a similar predicament at one point was a comfort, though the circumstances were too coincidental for her liking. Both individuals jumped over bridges. The note didn't state which overpass Peter used. There was no date on the note either, so there was no telling when he made his plunge. I guess I could stay here, but there's no food, and I'm definitely not going to suck the carpet for some feet water. Ew. She shuddered at the thought and slid off the chair. Based on the instructions, she took the farthest left hallway. The end of it wasn't the usual one-way trip. It curved and broke off into sectors that led to dead ends. The only one without an abrupt wall was a half wall with a crawl space. A lime green light emitted from the other end. A chill ran through her spine as she knelt at the tiny entranceway. On the other side was another yellow room fashioned as a den. A wonky star was carved into the wallpaper. She sucked in a breath and crawled. The rough carpet rubbed into her shirt, leaving her skin prickly and wet. When she stood, her chest burned. Ah! She peeked into her blouse. Her skin was red, no doubt irritated from whatever bacteria were living on the floor. She growled and scratched the area till the stinging became a soft heat. The green room was small. A 2-seater couch, beige coffee table, and empty bookcase made up the space. On the shelves sat a folded piece of pink paper. She picked it up. It was another note, though this one was much shorter due to it being ripped in half. Dear reader, it's me again, Peter, if you don't remember. I found paper. There was a notepad left on the table, so I'll be using this with my pen to continue the instructions. Admittedly, I could have kept this to myself, but after roaming this place for God knows how long, I figured it was best if I kept track of this place. Besides, it keeps me sane. The other night I thought I saw something peeking at me around the corner. I ran to it thinking it was a human, but there was nothing. Just another boring hallway. There are too many here to count. Anyway, you found the star. Yay! I went ahead to check for safe passage. Take this hallway all the way down and go right. This green lighting will stop when you round that corner. From there, just keep walking straight ahead. When you reach the room that looks like a mirror, go left and don't stop. I'll leave another star carved in the wall and a note. Good luck. Great. So I'll have to jump through hoops to get out of here? She folded the slip of paper and shoved it in her jeans. As she traveled, the green lighting caressed her body. It was warm and dried the stain on her shirt. As silence stretched, her steps slowed to a stop. Why am I trying? What would her mother call this? Oh yes, irony. A small scoff left her mouth. It turned into a chuckle. Oh, she'd be laughing at me right now. Catalina's mother was an English professor at the University of Chicago. She'd been with them for 15 years before she was diagnosed with dementia. From there, quoting Virginia Woolf became distant, incoherent mutterings. It wasn't that she hated her mother during those times, but the scars on her hands were a constant reminder that she didn't recognize her most days. The last thing her mother said when she visited was, "Do you have Dolly? Where is she?" Dolly was Catalina's twin sister. She died after catching tuberculosis at 4 years old. Even when close to death, her mother mourned her favorite child. Globs of tears fell down Catalina's shallow cheeks. "Mommy," she whimpered and wiped the corners of her eyes. Behind her, a crash rang out. She jumped and whipped around. Clipped bellows resounded in the direction of the living room. "What the fuck?" She breathed in a tight whisper. The lion's call pitched to a scream. By the sound of the accompanying stomps, it was big. She picked up her heels and sprinted down the hall. The green lights began to flash. She looked over her shoulder. A stringy black substance ran after her on all fours. For a second, it appeared to mimic human anatomy. A malnourished, sunken chest with limbs that stretched to the walls. Its hands and feet had 3-pronged claws that sank into the wallpaper and carpet as it chased her. It was the face that made Catalina scream. A mass of black meat sat above the chest with a human mask on its face. Faced forward, she came up to the right turn. Nails gripped the edge as she rounded it. The green light became white. The creature crashed into the wall behind her. She could hear its spindly legs squirm as it regained its bearings. The thin path broke off into an infinity room of white pillars and slippery tile. "Go left," she panted. The monster gained on her. She could see its reflection in the tile. Sweat formed on the crown of her head. A rich iron smell invaded her nostrils. She scrunched her face, heart in her throat. The creature reached out and snatched her back. Catalina yelped and darted around the columns. An automatic routine when she played soccer. She weaved through them, all while her back prickled from the open air. She felt as though needles stabbed her skin. The monster reached a second time. Its thin fingers loomed over her head. Its shadow fell over her shoulder. She could see it lower, and as black nails touched her hair, she swerved right. The creature, having put its weight into the swipe, fell forward with a startled screech. A hearty chuckle escaped her lips. Several feet away was a half wall with a star engraved on the top. The creature galloped for her as she slid into the opening. It slammed into the wall, limbs scrambling to get in. She got to her feet, breathless, and ran. Catalina collapsed when she could no longer hear the monster's foul screams. She lay on her front, chest heaving. "I made it," she thought, and smiled. An image of her mother cheering for her during high school playoffs flashed in her head. "I made it, Mommy," she mumbled. A small beep reached her ears. She lifted herself, elbows on the cool floor. There was a brown door at the end of the hallway with a smoke detector over it. The monster growled from where she had left it. No time was wasted. She yanked the door. Stale, dry air brushed her face. Beyond the entrance was a wide office with rows of cubicles. "Hello?" Her voice bounced around. On the tables were widescreen monitors and dust-covered keyboards. Unattended landlines dangled from the edges. She put one to her ear. Not even static. Out of the corner of her eye, Catalina spotted a familiar pink slip of paper next to a PC. She rushed to it and checked the note. "Dear reader, I hope to God you made it. So far, this is the only safe place I've found in this maze. The person I thought I saw was real. At least I think it was a person at one point. I hid in a crawl space when I passed by. It has a human face, like skinned human flesh slapped on it. Fucking gross, right? I don't know what it is, but avoid it at all costs. Every time you open a door, close it. So far, this has been safe, but I can't guarantee it. Behind the door on the other end are more offices and some vending machines. They work. I took the liberty of breaking them, so feel free to grab anything you might find. There might not be many chances for food after this." I saw a huge conference room with windows. The outside is a city, or I thought it was before I looked up. The night sky is painted. I'll leave the next piece of paper on that table. By then, I'll know more about this location. My best guess is that we're underground. We need to go up. Catalina's stomach grumbled. She hadn't planned to eat after spending the last $30 in her account on IHOP. It was supposed to be her last meal. Why hadn't the jump worked? Of course, death would be too good for her. Of course, she'd be left to suffer. She had never been a religious woman, but at that moment, Catalina prayed to God, hands clasped. She muttered a broken Our Father and asked for a way out. "If it helps, I won't jump off any more bridges," she mumbled and walked through the next door. Vending machines were scattered throughout break rooms and offices. At one point, she discovered an oddly shaped bathroom with 3 toilets, 1 sink, and no dividers. She used one and inspected her back in the mirror. There were thin, black scratch marks on her skin. "Damn it," she hissed and poked the area. The welded skin stung with every touch. She turned the handles on the sink and frowned. They were dry taps. Those vending machines better have water. 1 torn shirt and a bottle of lukewarm Dasani later, the wound was cleaned. Catalina, able to snag hand sanitizer, lathered it on her hands and bit her tongue as she dabbed the remainder on her back. It hissed in retaliation. Palms slammed on the nearest office table. To calm her nerves, she sat on a creaky swivel chair and tore into a bag of barbecue chips. They were stale and tasted like powdered sauce, by far the best thing she had ever eaten. She tried the phone next to her a second time and instinctively dialed her ex. He was a lawyer, and if he harbored any remorse, he would call his friends at the police station for help. However, considering the messy way they broke up, she doubted he'd find it in his heart to do one last thing for her. The line beeped, then died. Right. I forgot he said he wanted me out of his life. Us out of his life, she corrected. It's not like she wanted to keep it, but hadn't he promised her a pretty life with a family? All he had to do was file. She was sure his wife would have signed it. One romantic dinner later, Catalina surprised him with the news, to which he freaked out and promptly left her. He didn't return her calls or texts. One trip to a clinic erased any trace of him. Several redials later, the repeating tone cut off. No one would come to help her. Shaky exhales left her lips. Why hadn't she tried another way to die? Surely an overdose or a gun would have sufficed. No, she just had to choose the most dramatic version and hoped for the best. Her fingers gripped the thin handset. She rose and slammed the machine against the dingy table. It cracked with every pound. The keyboard was next. Monitor followed. She stopped at the heavy-set PC when her hands gave out. Familiar tears and sticky snot dripped down her face. By now, the last bit of mascara she'd worn was smeared into the mix. Her lashes were clumped in groups. It felt heavy. Why? Why couldn't I have fucking died? The smoke detector beeped in response. An hour later, Catalina hid under one of the desks and barricaded herself in with several chairs. Scattered chip bags and candy wrappers littered the floor. She wasn't sure how long she had stayed in the maze. There were no working clocks or windows. Even if there were, she considered, they wouldn't be real. The most recent note was cupped to her chest. Surely this Peter person made it out. So far, there was one monster, but it was too big to go through the thin gaps. Based on the contents of the letter, it wasn't smart. It tried the doorknob. Maybe it can't. She slept for 3 hours, then lay under the desk for 5 more. Combating boredom was never her strong suit. Her friends would often joke over how she failed to sit in hour-long lectures. Jessie even concluded that she had autism. It was an absurd suggestion, of course. Her family had no history of such disorders, only cancer from her father's side, whoever that was. Her mother never gave a name. Still, the teasing was a happy reminder that she was alive at one point. Enough to laugh and sit at a park bench for hours and just talk. She turned over and lay on her back. Under the desk, Catalina could make out the tiny engravings etched in the wood. Her brows furrowed as she read some aloud. Alice, forgive me. Margaret, I miss you. Benny, you were right. We could have been happy. The one that broke her was, I'm sorry, baby. Mummy's not coming home. How many people had found themselves in the same situation? How many cried under the same roof and rummaged through the vending machines? She had assumed Peter was the only one, but the dates on some of the carved writings went back to the 90s. Maybe they got out, she thought. Her eyes darted to the pink slip in her fingers. Conference room, okay. Chest puffed, Catalina crawled from her hideout, but not before she picked up an empty fountain pen and carved her initials in the sea of memories. The office spaces were separated by clean corridors. Some had blue-rimmed clocks that were stuck at different times. Others carried shelves with plastic plants. As she followed a wide path with couches pressed against the wall, a crack of thunder boomed in the space. Rain? She rushed to the other end and pried open the door. Bright light flashed before it went dark. The room was a conference hall with windows lined against the northern panel. A long table was in the center with thick, black swivel seats on either end. She ran to the glass and peered into the rainy evening. A cityscape was beyond the windows. Towered skyscrapers brushed a painted roof. Trees and grass patches swayed in the heavy raindrops. Her gaze flicked upward. The rain had come from busted sprinkler heads. That doesn't account for the thunder, though, she muttered and squinted. There has to be some speakers or pyrotechnics, but why make a fake city? She turned to the table. A slip of pink paper was folded neatly on it. A star was carved next to it. She picked it up and read, "Dear reader, crazy, huh? A fake city right outside the window? I'm not sure why it's here, but it's possible that we're in an underground government facility. Just a theory. I found some papers describing null zones and physics, fancy words for, hey, in reality, there are spots where atoms align. When you walk up to them, you basically fall out of your dimension and end up here. They're all over the world, many being in Texas. I thought the city would have answers, so I tried to get there, but every step took me back here. You see those doors on the east wall? I took the liberty of making big X's on the ones that looped back. I'm gonna go through the last one. If there's no X, then it's a way out. This area is nice and safe, but who knows how long it'll take that thing to learn how to get in. I already found open ceiling pads. I don't know if it can crawl in the rafters, but I don't want to be the one to find out. I highly doubt you'd want to either." Sure enough, she glanced right and spotted the row of doors. The last one was left clean. She scoffed and shook her head. Of course. Why am I not surprised? The door opened to a metal tunnel with pipes suspended from the roof. Oh, what the hell? With a heavy sigh, she shoved the third note in her pocket and stepped inside. Mold filtered through her nose. She coughed and pressed her arm to her face. The bolts above were covered in black spots. Shit. Heels picked up as she marched. I can't stay in this place too long, or it'll obstruct my breathing. Not sure if this is good for my back either. Small drips splashed on the concrete floors. A dirty sock stench made her head pound. She started to jog. At any black-crusted section, she'd hold her breath and sprint. How far does this go? Every nook and ridge was blocked by a brick wall. Catalina slowed to a stop and plopped on the only dry area in the hall. She panted and chugged the last bit of water she had in her plastic bottle. Fingers gripped the note as she read it a second time. Peter left no further instructions. Just great, she grumbled and put the paper in her back pocket. Thanks, Peter. A low rumble shook the pipes. She jumped and peered down the way she had come. It was pitch black. She took a step back. Silence ensued for all of 6 seconds before a deep lion's roar followed. Fast steps raced toward her. With a gasp, she bolted in the opposite direction. The scream turned to a high-pitched howl. Further ahead, a light blinked, every flash a different color. Her feet skidded as she dove into the doorway. Hands slapped an iron ladder. She climbed it just as the creature squirmed into the small door frame. Her body flew up the steps to a hatch. It was open. The creature swiped at her feet and clawed her ankle. A wail left her as she scrambled out of the hatch and slammed it shut. It had a thick padlock. She pressed her body against the smooth metal and secured it. The panel shook with every bang on the other side. Catalina whipped around. She was back in the yellow rooms. Her ankle bled from the black wound and sizzled with every step. Catalina's foot hummed when she stopped at a stool next to a working lamp. It was plugged into the wall, though there was no outlet. Nothing makes sense. A sudden rush gathered at the base of her throat. She lurched, hobbled to the corner, and puked. Oh, God, she shuddered and spat the last bits of Skittles in the puddle. Cold shakes took over as she limped back to the stool and slumped on the seat. After taking several deep breaths, she peered down at her foot. The blood soaked her sock and the rims of her shoe. She took it off and inspected it. To her relief, the scratches were shallow. The slips of paper bulged in her pocket. She took out the first letter, read it over, then pressed the grainy slip to the cuts. You'll do for now. She slipped her sneaker back over her sock and limped down the monotonous lobby. The area, though similar to the space she woke in, had finer wallpaper. The diamond patterns curled at the tips of the shape. It reminded her of Grandma Olivia's bathroom, which paired well with her orange and white checkered floor. She smiled as citrus and bleach surrounded her. It swirled around her thin, stringy hair. I miss those summers. A sudden throbbing headache reached her frontal lobe. Catalina groaned and held her temples. Damn it, don't start now. I was doing just fine. Dr. Hatlin warned her migraines were a clear symptom of the cancer. Next would be seizures and nausea. In her peripheral vision, a light flickered. A wall was split in half. It had a sizable gap, and beyond, a warm orange overhead light wavered. One half of the wallpaper had a star. Found you, she sighed, and scooted sideways through the narrow space. An empty apartment kitchen sat to the left. It consisted of a broken gas stove, wooden cabinets, and a window leading to another wall. Her eyes trailed from the thin frame to the small brown trail that started at the cabinet and down another crack in a barrier. A letter sat on the gray marble countertop. Dear reader, I hope you found this letter. I ran into that monster again in the tunnels. It managed to swipe my arm, but I used my jacket as a bandage. Still bleeding all over the place, though. Listen, I found something. Something great. One of these cabinets had a gun case. It had the same logo as the company paperwork I found. I guess they hid it in case one of their own got hurt. Sorry to say, but I took the Glock 19 that was in it. I'm going to kill that son of a bitch. Did you know it can't see? That face I talked about isn't a mask, but sliced human flesh. Real freaky shit. Still, it has no eyes, only a mouth. If I'm sneaky, I'll be able to shoot it before anyone else gets hurt. If it didn't work, well, you'll find it with my corpse. And hey, if this is my last letter, I just want to thank you. I don't even know who you are, but writing these notes has been the closest thing I've gotten to a friend for years. Good luck. Oh, and before I go, I got here in 2011. When you get out, can you find Moose and see if he's okay? I miss him. Your friend, Peter Nolan Jr. It's alive. Oh, Peter, she sighed with slumped shoulders. Catalina's heart fell. He didn't make it out or kill the creature. She was also aware that the year she jumped was 2016. More than likely, the cat was dead. She folded the paper and carefully placed it in her breast pocket. Her eyes glanced around the open space. There were patches of walls spread around her, all either directing to a dead end or a loop. On the carpet was a faint trail of dark spots. She followed it in cautious steps. The wound had started to bleed through the sheet of paper. With a huff, she took the other crumpled notes and wedged them around the inside of her sock. Red blood trickled onto the carpet. The trail continued for several minutes before a stench made her double over. "It smells like dog glands and rot," she gagged. The headache came back stronger. Around the corner was a deep nook. "Oh, God," she vomited. A black mass lay against a pale yellow wall. Dried blood mingled with mold in huge splatters. The source was a half-decayed body, sitting upright. Parts of their limbs were clean to the bone, while the rest were a partially preserved sack of flesh and exposed muscle. It had no face, with exposed brain matter. A gun lay at their side with 2 sets of magazines. Catalina held her breath as she leaned over and plucked the weapon and cartridges. Her vision blurred with tears as her skull throbbed in a rhythm. Once she put some much-needed space between herself and the body, she inhaled and took deep breaths. Even from afar, the black patterns were recognizable. "That must have been him," she groaned and clamped her lips together to stop another burst of bile from leaving her throat. "Get it together." She checked the rounds in her hand. The clip that was wedged in the gun had been emptied. When her uncle, a hunter in Wyoming, took her around the forest before the start of school, he'd demonstrate how to kill a deer by shooting a replica. She knew how to handle a shotgun, but the weapon in her hand was different. It felt heavy in her bloody palm and slightly sticky. "Can't be too hard, right?" She ejected the empty mag and shoved the full one inside, making sure to keep her fingers off the trigger, and aimed away from herself. A thought occurred to her. What would happen if the gun were jammed? Should she test it? She gathered it would be safer to fire a warning shot, but only if she was within a safe area. I could go back. As she turned to leave, a scream reached her ear. She scoffed and rolled her eyes before taking off in the direction she came from. Back in the kitchen, the monster's stomps got progressively louder. Catalina wedged herself back through the crack as the monster slammed itself against it. She jumped, eyes wide, as she saw a pale, slack-jawed face through the opening. The mask, being too small, looked uncanny against the black mass that undulated with every growl. Its human mouth stretched, showing an endless hole with rows of dagger-edged teeth and a bobbing white crustacean with beady eyes for a tongue. Oh, that's foul. The parasite's many little legs crawled over the bottom of the monster's mouth. It was headed for her. Catalina scrambled to the end and pointed the gun at it. Just as the bug hopped out of its mouth, she fired. The walls shook. Overhead lights flickered as a warbled shriek echoed. The small white creature scuttled out of the darkness. Her heel dug into it and dragged gray guts over the carpet. Is that it? Barrel raised, she pointed it around her. Moose? She turned to the gap in the wall. The lights on the other side shone white. It enveloped a tiny space and showed the beast lying on its back. The wide mouth pulsed as it whined. Moose? It continued, then rattled. Catalina frowned. It had no right to mimic a person, a human. Arms raised, she fired 4 shots through the rack and into its head. The slimy mask slid to the carpet. Green spores sprouted from the bullet holes. She sighed and walked away from the mess. She eventually made her way back to Peter's body. There was no funeral or fancy commemoration, only words of thanks and "I hope you're better wherever you are." The quiet, now official, made her smile. Her walks around the place were oddly peaceful. There was no hurry or concern as she followed the unmarked areas. The pain in her feet and back was replaced by a cooling numbness. She stopped on couches and chairs wherever she could, drank from abandoned water fountains, and ate what little food was stuck inside vending machines. As she searched for a comfortable spot to sleep, a soft beep echoed. It was a solitary noise, but oddly distinct, a light mechanical boop. Without thinking, she trailed it. The area it came from grew dark. Parts of the ceiling came in. Water trickled onto a soggy carpet. Lights buzzed and flickered, trying to hold on as far as they could. In the empty, black space, the boop was clear. An elevator sat at the other end, doors open, and a green light above it. She gasped and ran inside. They closed. She instinctively looked for buttons. However, the smooth, reflective metal walls had none. A whoosh took over as she felt it go upward. She sighed with relief, her mind a whirlwind of scenarios. She practiced what she'd tell the authorities. Would they believe her? She did look like a crazy person with the gun practically glued to her hand. However, she did have the scars to back up her story. The ride stopped. With a cheerful ding, the doors opened to a metal walkway. She exited the elevator and gazed at the posters along the stale beige walls. The images were of figures in hazmat suits following basic safety instructions. There were warnings about the confusing landscape they were about to enter. As she followed the story, she came across double doors. A push of the handle opened to a laboratory, but instead of the usual flasks and multicolored vials, blueprints for machines and doorways were open on the table. She paused and read the documents. Peter's theory was correct. A research company named Vital Industries had been approved for further funding. The donors? Politicians, unknowing taxpayers, and big corporations, preferably in oil. "No wonder you chose Texas," she mumbled and flipped it over. An abrupt termination page hit her in bold red letters. The reason? An unidentified lanky organism was found by research teams when collecting samples. The discovery of it led to 3 deaths before investors backed out. Vital Industries originally planned to use the space as an underground bunker in case of international nuclear threats. Growing tensions between leading countries would result in a fallout that the Earth would not recover from. The discovery of the pocket dimension would keep humanity safe. By the look of the given dates on the blueprints, they started the program in the late 80s and continued up to 2003. The push date for funding sat on September 11th, 2001. Catalina slept on the couch in the cold room for hours. The bleeding in her ankle had since stopped, and when she pried the soggy parchments off her skin, bits of it stuck to the cuts. She kept them on as a bandage. Just as she drifted off, an impulsive, conscious thought whispered in her ear. Would she be a threat to national security? She let out a frustrated noise and curled into a ball. If she found a way out, would it have mattered? Not if they locked her in federal prison or executed her in an undisclosed location. She'd be another face on a missing poster. The lab had a door, a simple, plain wooden door with a bright red exit sign hung overhead. She sighed and took it. As she stepped through, a gust of cool air hit her face. She staggered and squinted. The scene was nearly comical. She stood on a walkway that connected to the other half of the building. Around her was a bright open blue sky with sparse clouds on the other end of what was shaped to be an infinite hotel. Each window mirrored an odd room. She turned around, seeing she had left the same thing. The nearest window showed the monotonous yellow rooms. The one next to it had the abandoned office spaces. And next to that, the tunnels she ran through. A startled, maniac laugh left her as she doubled over. I left, she thought. I left for what? This is hell. A man-made hell. Bleary-eyed, she turned back for one final thing. Catalina left a note. With a pencil in the back of a document, she detailed who she was and her life. In it, she apologized to Jesse, her high school friend, for sleeping with her later husband. She apologized to him, too, for entertaining his fantasies and thinking she'd be a good mother to his unborn child. She finally forgave her mother for the childhood neglect she felt. Hell, she even left a thank you note to Peter, and in the end, she left a warning to the next person with instructions on where they'd find the gun. She signed off with her full name and stepped out into the cool sky. And just as another headache came on, she faced the shining, ray-filled sky and lifted the gun. Zoe Falk is a dark fantasy writer from San Antonio, Texas. Her writing specializes in surrealism, liminal spaces, and dissecting humanity's moral compass. Her work has been featured on the Atomic Voodoo Lounge before with her story Millie in Season 2, Episode 3, and her story Divine Fruit in Season 2, Episode 6. If you like what you heard, please visit AtomicVoodooLounge.com or search the Atomic Voodoo Lounge on your favorite podcast app or service. Thanks for listening, and please spread the word about the Atomic Voodoo Lounge's mix of speculative noir, poetry, fiction, and spoken word. In addition to the words, the AVL also has the beat. We play a variety of mood-inducing music, including surf, exotica, jazz, blues, and more. Copyright 2026 by Heavy Sixer Productions, LLC. All rights reserved. And remember, AtomicVoodooLounge.com.